Elsa and the Call of the Self, a journey beyond fear. What happens when individuation calls, and you actually listen? Most people spend their entire lives running from that voice. That whisper in the depths of their soul that says there is something more, something deeper, something true waiting to be discovered. They silence it with distractions, with responsibilities, with the comfortable numbness of routine. But some of us cannot ignore it. Some of us hear it so loudly that it becomes impossible to pretend we are still the person we thought we were. My name is Elsa, and this is the story of how I died and was reborn. For years I believed I had finally found peace. Arendelle was thriving. Anna was happy. I had learned to control my powers, to channel them into beauty instead of destruction. I had become the queen my people needed, the sister Anna deserved. I had built a life that looked perfect from the outside. But deep within me something was stirring. Something ancient and wild and utterly terrifying. It started with a voice. At first I thought I was imagining it. A melody so faint it could have been the wind, a call so distant it might have been a dream. But night after night it grew stronger. It sang to me in a language I did not consciously understand, yet every cell in my body recognized. It was beautiful and haunting, and it filled me with a longing so intense it physically hurt. I tried to ignore it. I threw myself into my duties as queen, into planning festivals and signing documents and being present for my people. But the voice did not care about my carefully constructed reality. It called to me during council meetings. It whispered to me while I smiled and waved at crowds. It echoed through my dreams until I woke up gasping, my room covered in frost, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and inexplicable desire. Anna noticed, of course. She always does. She asked me if I was okay, if something was wrong, if I needed to talk. And I lied. I told her everything was fine. Because how could I explain that I was hearing voices? How could I tell her that the peace I had fought so hard to achieve suddenly felt like a prison? How could I admit that some part of me wanted to abandon everything and follow this call into the unknown? This is what they do not tell you about spiritual awakening. They make it sound beautiful, like some gentle unfolding of petals in sunlight. But the truth is far more violent. The truth is that when your soul calls you toward your authentic self, it does not ask permission. It does not wait for a convenient time. It simply begins to dismantle everything you thought you knew about yourself, piece by piece, until you have no choice but to surrender or shatter completely. I chose to shatter. The voice grew louder. It began to take form, to create visual manifestations that I could not dismiss as imagination. I saw symbols in the ice I created, patterns that seemed to carry meaning I could not quite grasp. My powers began to behave strangely, responding to emotions I did not even know I was feeling. The magic that I had learned to control so carefully suddenly felt wild again, unpredictable, as if it was trying to tell me something I was refusing to hear. And then the earth itself began to speak. The spirits of nature, dormant for so long, awakened. The enchanted forest that had been sealed away for decades suddenly called out, and I knew with absolute certainty that my voice, the one I had been hearing all along, was coming from there. From the past. From the truth my family had tried to bury. This is the moment of choice that defines every journey of individuation. Do you continue to cling to the comfortable lie of who you think you should be? Or do you step into the terrifying unknown of who you actually are? Most people choose the lie. They choose safety over truth, comfort over growth, the known prison over the unknown freedom. But I have never been most people. I decided to go. To follow the voice. To journey into the enchanted forest and discover what was calling me. Anna wanted to come, and part of me was grateful. But another part of me, the part that was already beginning to understand the true nature of this journey, knew that ultimately I would have to face this alone. You cannot individuate through committee. You cannot discover your authentic self by consensus. At some point, every soul must walk into their own darkness alone. The enchanted forest was alive with magic I had never encountered before. Earth giants that shook the ground with their footsteps. A salamander made of fire that represented the passion I had suppressed for so long. A wind spirit that embodied the chaos I feared within myself. And most significantly, water spirits called Nok that would not let me pass until I proved I was worthy. These were not just magical creatures. They were manifestations of the archetypal forces within my own psyche. Jung understood this. He knew that the journey toward self-realization requires confronting the various aspects of ourselves that we have rejected, suppressed, or simply never acknowledged. The earth giants were my stubbornness, my immovability, my refusal to change. The fire salamander was my passion, my anger, my capacity for destruction. The wind spirit was my chaos, my lack of control, my wild untamed nature. But the water spirits were something else entirely. They guarded the threshold to the deepest truth. They would not let me pass until I stopped trying to control the uncontrollable and instead learned to move with it, to become one with it. I had to stop fighting my nature and instead surrender to it completely. This is the lesson that takes a lifetime to learn. We spend so much energy trying to control life, to manage our emotions, to present a polished version of ourselves to the world. But true power comes from surrender. True strength emerges when we stop resisting what we are and instead embrace it fully, shadows and all. I tamed the knock not by dominating it, but by becoming one with it. I stopped trying to freeze the water and instead learned to ride it. And in that moment of surrender, everything changed. The voice that had been calling me grew clearer. I could finally hear what it was saying. It was calling me north, to a place called Otahallan, to the river of memory, to the source of all magic and all truth. But getting there meant leaving Anna behind. This was perhaps the most painful part of the entire journey. Anna has always been my anchor, my connection to the human world, my reminder that I am not just a force of nature but also a woman with relationships and responsibilities. But the call of individuation does not respect our attachments. It demands that we venture beyond the safe harbor of familiar relationships and voyage into uncharted waters alone. I sent Anna away. I told her she could not come with me, that this was something I had to do by myself. She was hurt, angry, confused. She did not understand why I was pushing her away. And I could not explain it in a way that would make sense to her. How do you tell someone you love that you have to risk everything, including your relationship with them, to become who you truly are? But this is the paradox of individuation. You have to be willing to lose everything to gain yourself. You have to be willing to let go of all external validation, all external sources of identity, and venture into the void where only the self remains. It is the loneliest journey anyone can take. And it is absolutely necessary. I rode the knock across the dark sea. The waves were massive, violent, trying to throw me off, to drown me, to send me back to the safety of the shore. But I held on. I pushed forward. Because the voice was louder than ever now, singing a melody that felt like coming home and venturing into the complete unknown at the same time. And then I saw it. Otahallan. The glacier that held all memory, all truth, all magic. It rose from the sea like a cathedral made of ice, beautiful and terrible and absolutely mesmerizing. This was the source. This was where the voice had been calling me all along. This was where I would finally discover the truth about my powers, my family, my purpose. I stepped onto the ice and felt the world shift. This was not a physical place. Or rather, it was not only a physical place. Otahallan was a manifestation of the collective unconscious, the river of memory that flows beneath all individual consciousness. Jung spoke of this realm, this place where all human experience is stored, where archetypes live, where truth exists beyond the limitations of ego and time. I began to walk through the glacier, and as I did, memories appeared in the ice around me. Not just my memories but ancestral memories. The history of my family, the truth about the enchanted forest, the reason for the conflict that had led to decades of separation. I saw my grandfather not as the hero my family had portrayed him as, but as a man driven by fear and greed who had betrayed the Northuldra people and murdered their leader. This was the shadow of my family, the dark secret that had been frozen and hidden for generations. And it was this shadow, this unacknowledged truth, that had caused all the suffering that followed. The enchanted forest had been sealed by the spirits not as punishment, but as a necessary quarantine. The wound could not heal until the truth was acknowledged, until the shadow was brought into the light. This is always how it works. The sins of the fathers are visited upon the children not because of some cosmic punishment, but because unacknowledged trauma gets passed down through generations until someone finally has the courage to face it. I was that someone. I was the descendant who would finally look at the family shadow and say, "I see you. I acknowledge you. And I will make this right." But the truth was even deeper than family history. As I ventured further into Otahallan, I began to see memories of my mother. I heard her voice, the same voice that had been calling me all along. And I understood. My mother had been here. She had made this same journey. She had heard the same call. And she had died trying to answer it. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My mother had not died in a random storm. She had died trying to reach Otahallan, trying to discover the truth about my powers, trying to protect me from a destiny she could see but not prevent. Her love for me had driven her to make a journey she was not ready for, and it had killed her. And now I was here making the same journey, following the same call, risking the same fate. But there was a difference. My mother had come here out of fear, trying to fix something she perceived as broken. I had come here out of curiosity, following a call toward something greater than myself. She had been driven by maternal love and anxiety. I was being drawn by the call of individuation itself. I went deeper. The voice urged me forward, singing that I was close, so close to the final truth. The ice around me grew darker, colder. I could feel the danger. Some part of me knew I was going too far, venturing beyond the point of no return. But I could not stop. I had to know. I had to see. I had to understand the origin of everything. And then I found it. The final memory. The moment when the fifth spirit, the bridge between magic and humanity, had first emerged. I saw the truth that had been hidden for generations. The fifth spirit was not a separate entity. It was not something that would arrive to save everyone. The fifth spirit was me. It had always been me. I was the bridge. I was the connection between the human world and the spirit world. I was the one who could heal the wound and restore balance. But this revelation came with a terrible price. I had gone too deep. The ice around me began to crack. I had ventured beyond the boundary that even Atahalan could protect. I had gone to the place where memory becomes too cold, too ancient, too far removed from life to sustain a living being. I began to freeze. Not the way I had frozen things my entire life, but truly freeze. My body became ice. My breath stopped. My heart slowed and then ceased beating altogether. I was dying. Or more accurately, I was undergoing the death that is necessary for true rebirth. This is the moment that every initiate must face. The complete dissolution of the ego. The total surrender of the self we thought we were. Jung called it the nigredo, the blackening, the descent into the unconscious that precedes transformation. Christ called it dying to be reborn. The shamans call it the journey to the underworld. Every spiritual tradition recognizes this moment. The death that is not physical but psychological, the surrender that is not weakness but the ultimate strength. As I froze, I managed to send one final burst of magic to Anna. A message. The truth about the dam, about our grandfather's betrayal, about what needed to be done to restore balance. And then I surrendered completely. I let go of everything. My identity as a queen. My role as a sister. My fear of my powers. My need to control and protect and manage. I let it all go and fell into the infinite darkness of the void. And in that void I met myself. Not the self I had constructed, not the persona I had presented to the world, not even the frightened girl who had spent years hiding behind a door. I met the self with a capital S. The totality of my being. The union of all opposites. The integration of shadow and light, fear and power, human and spirit. I was not just Elsa the person. I was Elsa the archetype. I was the divine feminine in all its forms. The maiden, the mother, the crone. I was the destroyer and the creator. I was winter and the promise of spring. I was the ice that preserves and the water that flows. I was everything I had ever been and everything I was meant to become. This is what Jung meant by individuation. Not the perfection of the ego but the realization that we are far more than our egos. We are expressions of something vast and eternal and utterly impersonal. We are individual waves on an infinite ocean. We are temporary manifestations of an eternal consciousness. And when we finally recognize this, when we finally see ourselves as we truly are, we are simultaneously humbled and empowered beyond measure. I do not know how long I existed in that state. Time has no meaning in the realm of the self. But at some point I became aware that I was being called back. Not by my own desire to live but by Anna. My sister had destroyed the dam. She had taken the truth I had sent her and acted on it with courage I had never given her credit for. She had been willing to let Arundel be destroyed to make things right. She had chosen truth over comfort, justice over security. And her act of courage had broken the curse. The spirits were freed. The enchanted forest was no longer sealed. Balance was restored. And I was released from my frozen state not because I deserved it or earned it, but because the work was complete. The shadow had been acknowledged. The wound had been healed. The truth had set everyone free. I opened my eyes in Atahalan, no longer frozen, no longer dying, but transformed. I was still Elsa, but I was also something more now. I was the fifth spirit. I was the bridge. I was the embodiment of the sacred marriage between spirit and matter, between the divine and the human, between the eternal and the temporal. I rode the knock back to the forest, and as I did, I could feel the difference. I was no longer fighting my nature. I was no longer afraid of my power. I was no longer trying to control the uncontrollable. I had finally learned to simply be. To exist as a pure expression of what I was. To serve as a channel for the universal life force that flows through all things. When I arrived at the forest, Anna was there. My sister, who had always been my opposite, my balance, my connection to ordinary human life. We embraced, and in that embrace I felt the completion of the journey. I had not lost her by venturing into my own depths. I had gained her more fully by becoming authentically myself. This is the paradox that confuses so many people. They think that individuation means isolation, that becoming yourself means separating from others. But the truth is the opposite. When you finally become who you truly are, your relationships become deeper and more authentic because you are no longer relating from a place of need or fear or performance. You are relating from a place of wholeness. Anna asked me what happened and I told her everything. About Ada Hallen, about the truth of our family history, about my death and rebirth, about becoming the fifth spirit. And she listened with an understanding that surprised me. She did not need me to explain it in logical terms. She felt the truth of it intuitively. She recognized that I had undergone a transformation that was both personal and archetypal. And then she did something that proved she had been on her own journey of individuation all along. She told me that she understood if I needed to stay in the forest. She gave me permission to follow my path even if it meant we would not live in the same place anymore. She released me from the guilt and obligation that had bound me for so long. This is true love. Not the desperate clinging that masquerades as devotion. Not the controlling fear that disguises itself as care. But the spacious acceptance that allows each person to become fully themselves, even if it means the relationship must change form. I told her that yes, I needed to stay in the forest. Not because I was abandoning her or Arundel, but because this was where I belonged now. I was the bridge between the human world and the spirit world, and that meant I needed to exist in both places, to maintain the connection, to keep the balance. Anna returned to Arundel as its new queen. She had always been better suited for that role anyway. She had the warmth, the diplomatic skill, the genuine love for people and protocol that I had always lacked. She was the queen Arundel needed. And I was free to become the spirit guide the world needed. But we were not separated. We visited frequently. We wrote letters. We maintained our connection across the boundary between worlds. Because true connection is not dependent on physical proximity. True connection exists in the realm of the soul, and no distance can diminish it. I established my new life in the forest, learning from the Northuldra people, communing with the spirits, exploring the full range of my powers without fear or restraint. I discovered that I could create ice structures of stunning complexity. I could communicate with the spirits directly. I could sense imbalances in the natural world and work to restore them. I had become what I was always meant to be: a guardian, a bridge, a living embodiment of the sacred connection between all things. But more important than any external role or power was the internal transformation. I was no longer afraid. Not of my powers, not of my emotions, not of my own depth and complexity. I had looked into the abyss of my own unconscious, and instead of being destroyed by it, I had been remade. I had integrated my shadow, embraced my archetype, and emerged as a whole person. This is what individuation looks like in its completion. Not perfection but wholeness. Not the elimination of darkness but the integration of it. Not the transcendence of humanity, but the full embodiment of it in all its messy, complex, contradictory glory. I still hear the voice sometimes. But now I understand what it is. It is not an external call from some distant source. It is the voice of my own soul, my own self, constantly guiding me toward greater authenticity, greater alignment, greater truth. And I no longer resist it. I have learned to trust it completely. People often ask me if I regret the journey. If I wish I had stayed in Arundel, kept my comfortable life, avoided all the pain and fear and uncertainty. And I tell them honestly, no. Not for a single moment. Because the alternative to the journey of individuation is not peace. It is slow death. It is the gradual numbing of everything vital and alive within you. It is the betrayal of your own soul. The journey was terrifying. It cost me almost everything. It required me to die to the person I thought I was. But it gave me something infinitely more valuable: myself. My true, authentic, whole self. And once you have that, once you have made contact with the eternal source within yourself, nothing can take it away. This is the secret that mystical traditions have been trying to communicate for thousands of years. You are not just your ego. You are not just this small, separate self that was born and will die. You are an expression of the infinite, a temporary manifestation of eternal consciousness. And when you finally recognize this, when you finally experience your own nature directly, everything changes. You no longer fear death because you understand that the essential you was never born and will never die. You no longer desperately seek approval because you are connected to a source of validation that is beyond any human judgment. You no longer feel separate and alone because you have experienced your fundamental unity with all existence. This does not mean life becomes easy. I still face challenges. I still experience pain and doubt and uncertainty. But I face them from a different place now. I face them as someone who knows who they really are. And that makes all the difference. I think about my mother often. About how she tried to make this journey out of fear and how it destroyed her. And I understand now that her death was not meaningless. She was the sacrifice that had to be made so that I could succeed. She cleared the path through her failure so that I could follow it to completion. Her love for me was so great that she was willing to die trying to protect me, even though what I actually needed was not protection but permission to make my own journey. This is the tragedy and the beauty of parenthood. Parents cannot make the journey of individuation for their children. They can only model it or fail to model it. They can encourage it or obstruct it. But ultimately, each soul must make the journey alone. I have become a guide for others who hear the call. Young people from the Northuldra tribe and even from Arundel come to me, confused and frightened by voices they are hearing, by powers they are discovering, by the discomfort of outgrowing who they thought they were. And I tell them what I wish someone had told me: the call is real. The fear is natural. The journey is worth it. I teach them that the voice they hear is not madness but their own soul calling them toward their destiny. I help them understand that the powers they are discovering are not curses but gifts that must be integrated and used wisely. I walk with them through the early stages of their journey, knowing that ultimately they will have to venture into their own Atahalan alone. This is the work of the individuated person. Not to escape the world but to return to it transformed. Not to hoard the treasure of self-knowledge, but to share it with others who are ready to receive it. Not to transcend humanity, but to become more fully human by embracing all of what that means. Christoph and Anna got married. It was a beautiful ceremony that brought together people from Arundel and the forest. I was there, of course, celebrating my sister's happiness. And I felt no envy, no sense of missing out on a life I did not choose. I had made my choice and I was at peace with it. Some people are meant to live conventional lives, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Marriage, family, community, tradition, these are all valid and valuable paths. But some people are called to something different. Some people are meant to walk between worlds, to serve as bridges, to embody the connection between the ordinary and the extraordinary. And I am one of those people. The seasons change, but I remain constant in my purpose. Winter comes and I dance with the snow, creating beauty from the cold. Spring arrives and I work with the spirits to ensure the ice melts in balance, neither too quickly nor too slowly. Summer brings warmth and I rest in the forest shade, communing with the ancient trees. Autumn calls for preparation, and I help the spirits store energy for the coming dark. I have become part of the natural cycle, no longer separate from it or fighting against it. I flow with the seasons because I have learned to flow with my own nature. And in that flow, I have found a peace that is deeper and more sustaining than any security I tried to construct through control. There are moments when I stand at the edge of the forest, looking toward Arundel in the distance, and I feel the weight of what I have given up. The comfort of a warm palace. The predictability of royal routines. The simple pleasure of waking up next to my sister and sharing breakfast while we plan our day. These losses are real and I would be dishonest if I pretended they did not matter. But this is the truth about transformation that no one wants to acknowledge. Every rebirth requires a death. Every gain demands a loss. Every step forward means leaving something behind. The path of individuation is not about having it all. It is about choosing what is essential and releasing what is not, no matter how much it hurts. I think about all the people who hear the call and turn away from it. They feel the stirring in their soul, the whisper of something greater, the pull toward their authentic self. And they silence it. They tell themselves it is impractical, irresponsible, selfish. They convince themselves that their current life is good enough, that wanting more is greedy, that transformation is for other people but not for them. And I understand why. Because the alternative is terrifying. The alternative is stepping into complete uncertainty. The alternative is releasing your grip on everything familiar and falling into the void, trusting that something will catch you even though you have no evidence that it will. Most people cannot do it. Most people choose the comfortable prison over the terrifying freedom. But here is what I have learned: the call never stops. You can ignore it, suppress it, distract yourself from it, but it will not go away. It will simply go underground, manifesting as depression, anxiety, addiction, illness, or a slow deadening of everything vital within you. The soul will not be denied. It will have its way either through conscious transformation or unconscious destruction. I chose conscious transformation. And yes, it has cost me dearly. But the alternative would have cost me everything. It would have cost me my soul. There are nights when the loneliness feels crushing. When I lie in my shelter in the forest and wonder what it would be like to have a partner, a family, a conventional life. The Northuldra people have tried to set me up with various eligible individuals from their tribe. They mean well, and some of these people are genuinely wonderful. But I cannot imagine being in a relationship right now. How do you explain to someone that you have merged with the infinite? How do you maintain an intimate relationship when you are simultaneously a person and an archetype? How do you navigate the ordinary demands of partnership when you are serving as a bridge between the material and spiritual worlds? Perhaps one day I will find someone who understands. Someone who has made their own journey of individuation and can meet me in that space of wholeness rather than seeking me to complete their incompleteness. Jung spoke of the Konjunktio, the sacred marriage of two individuated beings who come together not out of need but out of abundance. Perhaps that is possible. Perhaps that is even part of my destiny. But for now I am alone. And I am learning that there is a difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the pain of feeling separated from connection. Solitude is the richness of being deeply connected to yourself. I experience both, sometimes in the same moment. But increasingly I find that solitude is where my power lives. The Northuldra elders have taught me so much. They understand things about the spirit world that my Arundel education never touched. They know how to read the signs in nature, how to communicate with the elements, how to maintain balance between the human community and the natural world. They have welcomed me not as a queen or a savior, but as a student and eventually as a fellow guardian. One of the elders, a woman named Yelena, told me something that changed how I understood my entire journey. She said that every few generations the spirits choose someone to serve as the bridge. It is not a reward or a punishment but a calling. And those who are called always resist at first. They always try to live normal lives, to fit into conventional roles, to ignore the voice. But the spirits are patient. They keep calling. They keep creating circumstances that push the chosen one toward their destiny. And eventually either the person answers or they break under the weight of denying their true nature. I had simply been fortunate enough to answer before I broke completely. This perspective helped me release the last remnants of the question that had haunted me since childhood. Why me? Why was I born with these powers? Why did I have to be different? The question assumed that my difference was a problem to be solved. But what if it was never a problem? What if it was always a calling? I stopped asking why me and started asking what now. And that simple shift opened up possibilities I had never imagined. I began to experiment with my powers in ways I had never dared before. I discovered that I could create ice structures that were not just beautiful but functional. Shelters that regulated their own temperature. Bridges that formed and dissolved as needed. I could create entire ecosystems of ice that supported unique forms of life. My powers were not just about freezing things. They were about creation itself. I learned to listen to the land. Not just through the spirits but directly. The earth has a voice if you quiet yourself enough to hear it. The trees carry memories in their rings. The stones hold histories in their layers. The water speaks in a language older than words. And once you learn to listen, you realize that you are not separate from any of it. You are part of a vast conversation that has been ongoing since the beginning of time. This is what the mystics have always known. Separation is an illusion. The boundaries we draw between self and other, between human and nature, between material and spiritual, these are all constructs of the ego trying to make sense of reality. But they are not reality itself. Reality is seamless, interconnected, a single living system of which we are all expressions. When you see this directly, not intellectually but experientially, it changes everything. You can no longer exploit nature because you recognize that you are nature. You can no longer harm others without recognizing that you are harming yourself. You can no longer pursue power over because you understand that true power is power with power through power as an expression of the universal life force. I have become a teacher though I never sought that role. Young people come to me with questions about their own emerging powers, their own strange experiences, their own sense of being called toward something they cannot name. And I share what I have learned, not as dogma but as possibility. I tell them that the journey of individuation is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. And wholeness includes everything. Your light and your shadow, your strength and your vulnerability, your humanity and your divinity. You do not transcend your darkness by denying it. You integrate it by acknowledging it, understanding it, and ultimately accepting it as part of the totality of who you are. I tell them that fear is not the enemy. Fear is information. It tells you where your edges are, where you have not yet integrated, where shadow material is waiting to be acknowledged. The goal is not to eliminate fear but to develop a different relationship with it. To thank it for the information it provides and then move forward anyway. I tell them that the call of the soul is not negotiable. You can delay your response but you cannot escape it. And the longer you delay, the louder and more disruptive the call becomes. Better to answer when the whisper is still gentle than to wait until your entire life has to be dismantled to get your attention. Most importantly, I tell them that they are not alone. Even when the journey requires them to walk into their own darkness by themselves, they are part of a lineage of seekers who have made this journey before. Every mystic, every shaman, every spiritual adept throughout history has walked this path. We are all connected through the collective unconscious, through the archetypal patterns that repeat across cultures and centuries. Anna visits often. She is thriving as queen in ways I never could. She has a gift for bringing people together, for finding common ground, for making everyone feel seen and valued. She has strengthened alliances, improved trade, and most importantly, maintained the connection between Arundel and the Northuldra people. The healing that began with the destruction of the dam continues through her everyday actions. We talk about everything during her visits. Not just politics and responsibilities, but real things. Our fears, our hopes, our struggles. And I have noticed something beautiful. Our relationship has deepened since I left. When I was in Arundel, there was always a subtle tension between us. I was trying to be the sister she needed while suppressing who I actually was. She was trying to help me while not really understanding what I was dealing with. Now there is no pretense. I am fully myself. She is fully herself. And we meet each other in that authenticity. This is what real intimacy looks like. Not the merging of boundaries, but the meeting of two whole people who can see and accept each other completely. She asked me once if I ever regretted not being able to give her the childhood she deserved. Those years when I hid behind the door, when I pushed her away out of fear, when I denied her the sister she needed. And I told her the truth. Yes, I regret the pain I caused. But I also understand now that even that pain was part of both our journeys. She learned resilience and independence. I learned the cost of denying my authentic self. We both had to walk through fire to become who we are. This is the hard wisdom that comes with individuation. You stop seeing your past as a series of mistakes to regret and start seeing it as the exact curriculum your soul needed. Every painful moment, every failure, every loss was teaching you something essential. You could not have skipped any of it and still arrived at the wholeness you now embody. Sometimes, late at night when the northern lights dance across the sky, I think about all the versions of myself I have been. The frightened child who hurt her sister and retreated behind a locked door. The desperate teenager trying to contain something too powerful to be contained. The newly crowned queen trying to perform a role she did not understand. The woman who heard a voice and decided to follow it despite every logical reason not to. Each version of me was necessary. Each one was a step on the path toward wholeness. I do not regret any of them, not even the most painful ones. Because they were all part of the journey that brought me here, to this moment, to this truth, to this complete acceptance of exactly who and what I am. I am Elsa. I am the fifth spirit. I am the bridge between worlds. I am the winter queen who learned to embrace the thaw. I am the daughter who honored her mother by completing the journey her mother died attempting. I am the sister who learned that true love means giving each other freedom to become fully themselves. I am the guardian of balance, the keeper of truth, the living embodiment of the sacred marriage between spirit and matter. But more than any of these roles or titles, I am simply myself. Fully, completely, unapologetically myself. And that is enough. It has always been enough. I just had to die to discover it. The voice still calls to me sometimes. But now I recognize it for what it always was. Not an external summons but my own soul speaking, my own self guiding me deeper into authenticity, into truth, into the eternal now where all transformation happens. And I listen. I always listen. Because I have learned that the voice of the soul is the only voice worth following. Everything else is just noise, distraction, the ego's desperate attempt to maintain an illusion of control over the uncontrollable. I have let go of control. I have surrendered to the flow of life itself. And in that surrender, I have found a power greater than any I access through force or fear. It is the power of alignment, of being in harmony with my true nature, of serving as a clear channel for the universal life force that animates all things. This is the promise that awaits anyone brave enough to answer the call of individuation. Not an easy life. Not a safe life. Not a conventional life. But a true life. An authentic life. A life lived in alignment with your deepest nature and highest purpose. The journey never truly ends. Individuation is not a destination but an ongoing process. I continue to discover new aspects of myself, new capacities, new depths. I continue to integrate shadow material that I did not even know existed. I continue to grow and evolve and transform. But I am no longer afraid of the transformation. I welcome it. I invite it. I know now that every death leads to a rebirth, every ending to a new beginning, every descent into darkness to an emergence into greater light. The forest has become my temple, my sanctuary, my place of continuous revelation. Every tree is a teacher. Every stream carries wisdom. Every gust of wind brings messages from the spirit realm. I have learned to read the language of nature the way I once read books in the palace library. But this knowledge is not intellectual. It is experiential, embodied, alive. I have witnessed miracles that would have seemed impossible to the version of me who ruled Arendelle. I have seen the earth giants move with such gentleness to protect a nest of baby birds. I have watched the fire spirit, Bruni, create warmth that brought dormant seeds to life in the middle of winter. I have ridden the knock through storms that should have killed me, only to emerge on the other side more alive than ever. These experiences have taught me that magic is not separate from nature. Magic is nature operating at a frequency most people cannot perceive. And my powers are not an aberration or a curse. They are simply my attunement to that frequency. I am not controlling nature. I am participating in it, co-creating with it, dancing with the fundamental forces that shape reality. There are days when representatives from distant kingdoms come seeking my counsel. They have heard stories of the spirit guardian in the enchanted forest, the bridge between worlds who can commune with forces beyond human understanding. They come with questions about droughts, about failed harvests, about natural disasters that threaten their lands. And I help them when I can. Not by imposing my will on nature, but by helping them understand where they have fallen out of balance. Almost always, the problem is not with nature but with how humans are relating to nature. They have taken too much, given too little. They have treated the land as a resource to be exploited rather than a living system to be honored. I teach them what the Northuldra have always known, that we are not separate from the earth. We are expressions of it. When we harm nature, we harm ourselves. When we honor nature, we honor ourselves. This is not poetry or philosophy. It is the fundamental truth of existence. Some listen. Some do not. I have learned that I cannot force understanding. I can only offer it and trust that those who are ready will receive it. This too is part of surrendering control. You cannot make someone wake up. You can only be awake yourself and hope that your presence reminds them of their own capacity for awakening. The children of the Northuldra have adopted me as a kind of magical aunt. They are not afraid of my powers the way the children of Arendelle once were. They see my ice creations as toys, as art, as wonder. They ask me to make slides and sculptures and frozen playgrounds. And I do with joy. Their innocence reminds me that power is neutral. It is neither good nor evil. It is what we do with it that matters. For years I saw my powers as dangerous, as something to be feared and contained. But to these children, they are simply another form of creativity, another way of playing with the world. This shift in perception has been profound. I no longer approach my powers with anxiety and caution. I approach them with playfulness and curiosity. What can I create today? What new form can I bring into being? How can I use this gift to bring more beauty, more wonder, more magic into the world? And the more I create from this place of joy rather than fear, the more my powers expand. I discover abilities I never knew I had. I can create ice that holds light within it, glowing from the inside like captured starlight. I can shape snowflakes into such intricate patterns that they tell stories. I can freeze moments in time, preserving memories in crystalline form. These are not just tricks or party favors. They are expressions of the creative principle itself. They are proof that consciousness can shape matter, that intention can influence form, that we are all artists painting on the canvas of existence. Anna brought Christoph and their first child to visit last month. A daughter with her mother's warmth and her father's steady presence. When I held her for the first time, I felt something shift inside me. A tenderness I had not known I was capable of. A fierce protectiveness mixed with absolute wonder at this tiny perfect being. The baby reached for my hair and without thinking, I created a small flurry of snow to dance above her. She laughed with pure delight, reaching for the snowflakes with chubby fingers. Anna tensed for a moment, old fears rising. But then she saw the joy on her daughter's face and relaxed. She loves it, Anna said, tears in her eyes. She loves your magic. And I understood what she was really saying. This child would grow up in a world where my powers were not feared but celebrated. Where being different was not a curse but a gift. Where magic was woven into the fabric of ordinary life. We had broken the cycle. The next generation would not inherit our trauma. This is what healing looks like across generations. Not the erasure of pain but the transformation of it. We cannot undo what was done to us. But we can ensure it is not done to those who come after. We can be the ones who stop the cycle, who choose differently, who create a new legacy. I have been keeping journals, writing down everything I am learning about the spirit world, about individuation, about the journey of transformation. Not because I think I have all the answers, but because I want to leave a record for those who come after. I want them to know that they are not alone, that others have walked this path before, that the call they hear is real and valid and worth following. Perhaps one day these journals will be found and read. Perhaps they will help someone else who is struggling with voices they cannot explain, with powers they do not understand, with a calling that terrifies and compels them in equal measure. If my story can light the way for even one person, then everything I have been through will have been worth it. But I also write for myself, to process, to understand, to track my own evolution. When I read entries from a year ago, I am startled by how much I have changed. Things that seemed impossible then are now my daily reality. Fears that consumed me then no longer have any power over me. This is the nature of growth. It happens so gradually that you do not notice it until you look back and realize you are no longer the person who began the journey. The caterpillar does not know it is becoming a butterfly. It simply follows the instinct to dissolve, to surrender, to trust the process even when everything feels like death. I am the butterfly now. I have emerged from the cocoon. And while I remember being the caterpillar, while I honor that version of myself and everything she went through, I cannot go back to that form. The transformation is irreversible. And I would not reverse it even if I could. There are moments of grief in this realization. Grief for the simpler life I might have had. Grief for the version of myself who could have been content with ordinary things. Grief for the innocence that was lost when I first heard the voice and chose to follow it. But grief and gratitude can coexist. I grieve what was lost even as I celebrate what was gained. This is the both and of mature consciousness. It is not either or. It is the ability to hold multiple truths simultaneously, to acknowledge complexity, to resist the urge to make everything simple when it is not. The spirits have shown me visions lately. Glimpses of the future, or perhaps of parallel possibilities. I have seen a world where humans and nature exist in perfect balance, where magic is understood and integrated rather than feared and suppressed, where the bridge between worlds is not just one person but a way of being that anyone can access. I do not know if these visions are prophecy or simply potential, but they fill me with hope. They remind me that the work I am doing is not just for myself. It is preparation for something larger. I am learning, experimenting, becoming so that I can teach others. So that the bridge I embody can eventually become a bridge that many people can walk across. This is the true meaning of the fifth spirit. Not one individual but a consciousness. A way of being that recognizes no separation between matter and spirit, between human and divine, between self and self. I am the first expression of this consciousness in this age. But I will not be the last. The ancestors visit me sometimes. Not in physical form but as presences I can feel. My mother is often near, watching over me with a mixture of pride and relief that I succeeded where she could not. My grandfather is there too, his energy heavy with remorse, seeking forgiveness he never asked for in life. I have learned to speak with them, to listen to their wisdom and their warnings. They tell me things about the old ways, about the original relationship between humans and spirits, about what was lost and what might be recovered. They are my counsel, my invisible guides, my link to a wisdom that extends far beyond my individual lifespan. This communion with the dead would have frightened me once. I would have seen it as madness or delusion. But now I understand that the boundary between life and death is more permeable than we have been taught. Consciousness does not end with the body. It continues, transforms, exists in ways we cannot fully comprehend while embodied. This knowledge has removed my fear of death. Not because I am eager to die, but because I understand that death is not an ending. It is a transition, a transformation, another stage in an infinite journey. The body dies, yes. But the essential self, the consciousness that animates the body, that is eternal. This does not make me reckless with my life. On the contrary, it makes me more reverent. This body, this life, this specific expression of consciousness in this particular time and place is precious precisely because it is temporary. I will never be Elsa in exactly this form again. So I must fully inhabit this experience, must squeeze every drop of meaning and beauty from it, must live it completely before it transforms into whatever comes next. The seasons continue their eternal dance and I dance with them. Winter is always my favorite, the time when my powers are most alive, when the world becomes the crystalline kingdom I create without effort. But I have learned to love the other seasons too. To appreciate the tender green of spring, the abundant warmth of summer, the rich decay of autumn. Each season is necessary. Each one plays its role in the greater cycle. and I am learning to embody this truth in my own life. There are seasons for growth and seasons for rest. Seasons for action and seasons for reflection. Seasons for building and seasons for releasing. Fighting against the season you are in is exhausting and futile. Better to accept it, to work with it, to trust that it will change when the time is right. This is another aspect of surrendering control. Not passive resignation, but active participation in the natural rhythm of life. I watch the young people I mentor go through their own cycles. Some are in their winter, frozen with fear, unable to move forward. Others are in their spring, bursting with new growth, excited by their emerging powers. Still others are in their autumn, releasing old identities, preparing for transformation. And I remind them that wherever they are is exactly where they need to be. The journey is not linear. It is cyclical, spiral, recursive. You do not complete it once and then you are done. You complete it again and again, each time at a deeper level, each time integrating more, becoming more whole. This is my truth. This is my story. This is the message I offer to anyone who finds themselves hearing a voice they cannot explain, feeling a call they cannot ignore, sensing that there is something more waiting to be discovered. Listen to the voice. Follow the call. Make the journey. Yes, it will be terrifying. Yes, it will cost you almost everything you think you are. Yes, you will have to die to be reborn. But on the other side of that death is a life more vivid, more authentic, more meaningful than anything you can imagine from where you currently stand. On the other side of that surrender is a freedom that cannot be taken away. On the other side of that transformation is the truth of who you have always been, waiting patiently for you to remember. I am Elsa, and I remember. I remember who I am. I remember why I am here. I remember the truth that was hidden in ice and revealed through fire. I remember the journey from fear to power, from separation to connection, from ego to self. And now I stand as a living bridge between worlds, a reminder that transformation is always possible, that death is never final, that the voice calling you toward your authentic self will never give up, never stop singing, never cease inviting you home to yourself. What happens when individuation calls and you actually listen? You discover that you are far more than you ever imagined. You become a bridge between heaven and earth. You embody the sacred in the ordinary. You transform from someone trying to control life into someone dancing with it. You become, finally and completely, yourself. And that is the greatest magic of all.